What is up, guys? No Data here, and welcome to yet another Piggy video. Today I decided to do something a little bit interesting. I'm actually going to make a tier list of all the traps in Roblox Piggy, just to celebrate the release of Book 2 Chapter 12, and also it's spooky month, so I decided this is a bit fitting. So in this video, we are going to go ahead and make a tier list of all of the Piggy traps. I've played Piggy for quite a while. I believe I've been playing it for about a year and a half now, and let me tell you, some traps are just way better than others. So in this video, I'm going to tell you guys the best and worst traps in Roblox Piggy. So let's go ahead and lay down the ground rules for this tier list. Basically, I'm going to be ranking the traps by how useful they are, how effective they are at killing other players, how much energy they cost to place down, whether or not there's a counterplay to a certain trap. So, you know, if you place down a trap, the survivor might have a counterplay to counter the trap. And also, guys, I would like to point out that jump trapping is going to be very much taken into consideration when making this tier list. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, basically jump trapping is when you jump and then you're able to place a trap in midair, and that actually causes a lot of the traps in the game to float in the air, which is really useful. That actually makes a lot of traps far more effective. Some of them are only really useful because of jump trapping. So yeah, that technique is going to be taken into consideration. So just make sure you're familiar with what jump trapping is, because we're going to be referring to it a lot. And also, for most traps, we're just going to be assuming that the Piggy is placing them in the doorway, because most of the time that's an optimal place to put a trap. If you put a trap out in the open, it's really not going to do anything. The players are just going to walk past them. So we're going to be assuming in most cases that the Piggy is going to place them in a doorway. And if you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like on it and subscribe for more videos in the future. Alright, let's go ahead and get started with the tier list. So first, we are going to start with the F tier. There are two traps in F tier. These are the two worst traps in the game, and there's really no reason to ever use them. So starting with the very bottom of F tier, the worst trap in the game out of all of these traps. I've thought about it quite a bit, but the worst trap is definitely the egg trap. This is the worst trap in Roblox Piggy. So the egg trap, basically, the Piggy can place it down for 4 energy, and when a player steps on it, they basically get a little PNG image on their screen, and then the player slows down for a little bit, and then when the player is slowed down, Piggy walks faster than them so they can potentially catch them and kill them. Now, the big problem with this trap is it's incredibly small. This is one of the smallest traps in Roblox Piggy, so therefore it is incredibly easy to just jump over. You can easily jump over this trap with no issues whatsoever. And even if you jump trap with the egg trap, the player can easily just walk around the trap because it's so tiny. Even if you put it in a doorway, they could just go and walk right around the trap and be perfectly fine. The egg trap is really no threat whatsoever. It's super easy to jump over. The PNG image on your screen really does nothing. I mean, it's an annoyance if anything, but I can still see what's happening on the screen, and then it fades away. It's really not that bad. And if you want to slow players down with a trap, you might as well just use the slow trap, because not only is that way better, but it also costs 1 less energy. It costs 3 energy to place down the slow trap. So yeah, the egg trap, worst trap in the game. You can easily jump over it. You can easily walk around it. It's ridiculous how this thing costs 4 energy. If this trap costs like 2 energy to the point where you're able to spam this trap, then maybe I could see it kind of being useful. But even so, a bunch of a bad trap is still a bad trap. So egg trap, worst in the game. Now, the second trap in F tier, and this is the second worst trap in the game, is the small trap. Now, the small trap is just as small as the egg trap. So both of them are incredibly small. So just like the egg trap, you can easily jump over this thing. You can walk around it. Any competent player will be able to just jump over this trap with no issues whatsoever. And the meter update in particular kind of ruined this trap, because the thing is, the small trap actually costs 4 energy, which is kind of ridiculous because the default trap costs that same amount of energy. And that's just kind of bizarre to me, because the default trap is literally just a bigger version of the small trap, and it literally costs the same amount of energy, and I don't understand why. You would think that the small trap would be a lot less energy. Again, maybe like 2 energy. That would make sense for the small trap, but it's literally equal to the default trap which everyone has, and the default trap is way better than the small trap. I'll get into the default trap when we get there, but there's no reason to use the small trap when you have the default trap right there that's way better for the same amount of energy. So yeah, the small trap is also an F tier. Anyway, that concludes it for the F tier. Now we are going to go to the D tier, and there's actually only one trap in D tier. So this trap is not completely useless, but it just really sucks. So the only trap that is going to be in D tier is the teleporter trap. Now this is a really interesting trap. So this trap costs 5 energy to place down, and it's actually used by Piggy and not the players. So if a player steps on a teleport trap, it doesn't do anything. But if the Piggy has placed down 2 teleporter traps and steps on one, they'll actually be able to teleport between those 2 traps. Now, it is important to note that you can only have 2 teleporter traps at a time. If you place down a 3rd one, it'll actually get rid of one of your current teleporter traps. However, what is nice about the teleporter traps is they're actually permanent. Unlike all the other traps in the game, which will eventually go away, these traps are permanent, giving you don't place a 3rd teleporter trap. But the big issue about the teleporter trap for me is just, it is so freaking slow. When you step on the teleporter trap, it takes ages for the Piggy to teleport, and then once they teleport, they're still in like a few second cooldown before they can actually walk. So in most situations, any competent player can see that Piggy is teleporting to their teleport trap, and then they'll be able to react to that. So if a player is walking near a teleport trap, they can see that, oh, Piggy is teleporting, and then they'll be able to react accordingly. They'll be able to walk away from Piggy. Conceptually, this trap definitely does have a lot of potential. If this trap was instantaneous, like boom, you step on the trap and you instantly teleport, then this would be a really good trap. And in general, theoretically, you can catch players by surprise with this teleport trap. If they're not paying attention, you could catch someone by surprise. But generally, this trap is just very reactable and really not going to do all that much for you. And with really bad timing, you can actually be stuck in a loop where you're constantly teleporting between the 2 traps. And it is possible to get out of this loop, but it's really difficult. So sometimes this trap might completely screw you over because you might be caught in a loop where you'll just teleport between your 2 traps and you won't be able to do anything. So yeah, overall, again, maybe you could use this as a sort of surprise factor, but for the most part, teleporter trap, it's just not really that good. It's going to be the only one in D tier. But now moving on to C tier, these traps can be useful in some situations, but generally they might just have a counterplay that really just makes them fall flat in their potential. So there are 2 traps for the C tier, and the first trap that I'm going to place is the slow trap. So the slow trap, this is actually the cheapest trap in the game when it comes to energy. This trap costs 3 energy to place, which is way less than any other trap in the game. It is the exact same size as the default trap. However, instead of trapping the players, they actually slow them down. So much like the egg trap, if they get hit by the slow trap, they'll be slowed down, and then Piggy can go ahead and catch up to them. Now, this is leaps better than the egg trap because this is a way bigger trap. It's way easier for the players to get hit by this. Now, if a Piggy places down this trap regularly, the player can jump over it. However, it is pretty difficult timing, especially if it's in a doorway. It's a really precise jump to be able to jump over this trap. And if the Piggy actually places a well-timed jump trap, this trap will actually be completely unavoidable in doorways because the trap will be floating, so there'll be no way to actually jump over it. So if you get good at jump trapping, this will actually be a pretty useful trap for you. However, this slow trap has a pretty big counterplay. If you use the sprint ability, you can just go ahead and still outrun the Piggy. Just make sure you use the sprint perk after getting hit by the trap and not before. A lot of people are gonna have the sprint ability because not only is it a really good ability, but it's the default ability. Everyone just has it by default. So unfortunately, that counterplay just makes this trap fall flat. But if someone doesn't have the sprint ability, then this is an incredibly useful trap. Now, moving on to the second trap in the C tier, this might actually be a pretty controversial one but I'm going to be putting down the Tombstone Trap. So the Tombstone Trap was a trap that you could get in the Halloween 2020 event, and this is actually the most expensive trap in terms of energy use. The Tombstone Trap costs an entire 10 energy to place down, so you have to use your entire meter to place down this trap. It's actually the complete opposite of the slow trap, which is the cheapest one in terms of energy. Now this trap actually is pretty big. I don't believe there's a way to jump over or avoid this trap. I'm pretty sure if you place this in a doorway, it's guaranteed to hit. And when a player steps on it, it doesn't actually trap them, but it actually spawns in a Piggy bot to go after the players. So when someone steps on this trap, a bot will be spawned in to hunt down the players. I believe this bot will hunt down players for around 15 to 20 seconds, and then it'll go away. It'll also go away if the bot manages to get a kill. However, a pretty big downside to this is if the bot actually kills a player, you won't get credit for the kill, so you actually won't get any Piggy tokens if this bot kills a player. So conceptually, this trap is really powerful. Again, you're placing down a bot to, help you in killing the players. However, the big issue for me is just how short-lived this trap actually is. The bot is only available for like, what, 10 to 20 seconds? I don't know the exact amount of time, but it's not all that active for a really long time. And not to mention, this bot is just really slow. And also, Piggy bots are just really predictable. They'll always walk straight to you. They'll never try to cut you off or anything. So the bots are just really predictable, and any competent Piggy player will know how to work around a bot. Even if there is another player chasing them, it does make it kind of difficult, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to avoid the zombie. And given how short-lived the trap is, it's just really not all that useful for how expensive it is. Again, you have to use your entire full meter just to place down one of these traps, only for a player to just walk past the trap and not really pay much attention to it. It also takes a while for the bot to actually crawl out of the ground. So because of those things, this trap just really isn't much of a threat, and it costs so much energy to use. You'll probably catch quite a few players by surprise with this, especially if there's a lot of people. You're more than likely to catch someone by surprise, so you might get a kill with this trap, and again, if you do, you're not even going to get credit for that kill. But this can be a threat because, again, it is another Piggy, but it's just really not all that good. If you want to have another bot go after the players, just use Crawling Trap. Crawling Trap is honestly just so much better, and it costs less energy, but I'll get to Crawling Trap when we get to Crawling Trap. So now we are moving on to B tier. There are two traps in this tier. These are the traps that are really useful, but in many cases, they just have a better replacement for them. And the first trap that I'm going to place for the B tier is the Alarm Trap. Now, this is a pretty interesting trap. It is the exact same size as the default trap, and it actually stuns players for the exact same amount of time as the default trap. But the big difference between these two traps is the Alarm Trap has 6 energy, which is 2 more than the default trap, and when a player steps on this trap, there will actually be an icon over their head so the Piggy can actually find where they are. You can see the icon through walls, so it basically exposes the player's location. So this is a really interesting trap because in terms of killing players, it can definitely get the job done. If you just place this trap normally, a player can just jump over it with some pretty precise timing. But if you jump trap with the Alarm Trap, it'll actually be completely impossible for the players to avoid. So if you jump trap with this in a doorway, then yeah, that's basically just a guaranteed kill. There's no way for a player to actually avoid that trap. But the reason the Alarm Trap is at B tier is just its gimmick is not really all that useful, and there's just so many better traps in the game to use. So again, with the Alarm Trap, it is 2 more energy to place down than the default trap in exchange for the little alarm thing. But the thing is, there are many other resources that you can use to locate a player. First of all, with pretty much every trap, when a player steps on it, it makes a noise. So any competent player can just remember where they place their traps and then listen for the noise. So when they hear a noise, they can think, oh, I placed a trap in this area. so someone must be there. So yeah, I'm kind of torn with the alarm trap, because if you jump trap, then this is a really good trap. It gets the job done. It's a guaranteed kill. But if you're using the alarm trap, you're basically wasting 2 energy for nothing. You can just use the default trap, which costs 4 energy, and you'll get the exact same results. And the specific perks of the alarm trap just aren't really worth it. So there's just really no reason to use this trap, but it's good. So I'm just gonna put it at B tier. And secondly, in B tier, I am going to be placing the mouse trap. Now the mouse trap is an incredibly fast yet non-lethal trap. It'll zoom around the map. It'll go straight to the players. It goes right through the doors. This thing is really fast. And if this trap catches a player, it'll actually notify the piggy where that person is. So the piggy will be able to follow that icon and locate where the survivor is. So there's quite a bit to talk about with this trap. First of all, this trap can be avoided, although typically players don't really bother trying to avoid this. But, you know, if you move around in a certain way, it actually is possible to avoid the mouse trap. So if it's going after you, you can try to avoid it. I wouldn't really recommend it, because it's just really difficult to do. And if you're distracted with the mouse trap, you might just run into Piggy. But another really big thing about this mouse trap is it's actually bugged. So when the mouse trap catches a player, an icon appears above their head for a few seconds. However, this mouse trap will actually disappear after a certain amount of time. But if a player has this icon over their head while the mouse trap disappears, it'll actually be bugged, and the icon will actually be stuck on their head until they die. So let me reiterate, if this bug happens to you, you will be completely exposed to Piggy until you die. Not when the round ends, it's until you die. So if you manage to actually escape this map while completely exposed to Piggy at all times, if you manage to escape, you will actually still have that icon on you in the next round. So literally, you are stuck with that bug until Piggy kills you. You'll always be exposed. And it's actually that bug alone that brings this mousetrap up to B tier. I'm gonna be honest, if it wasn't for that bug, this trap would easily be a C tier. But because of that bug, just someone being exposed to Piggy at all times, it just brings this trap up to B tier. But other than that, in terms of its use, it's okay. Obviously, this trap is only used for the sole purpose of finding players. So if you're having trouble finding a player, then you can go ahead and place down this trap and it'll find the players for you. So for the most part, it does a pretty good job at what it does. It is really, really good at finding those extra players. However, the thing is, knowing where the players are is really only half the battle. And this trap just really isn't lethal. They don't trap them at all. And there are just many other better ways of finding a player. First of all, you can just listen for their footsteps. If you listen really closely, you can find a player just based off of their footsteps. And another really good way to find the player is with the crawling trap. But I'll talk about the crawling trap when we get there. So yeah, the mouse trap, it's okay. Again, because of that bug alone, I'm gonna put this thing at B tier. But other than that, it's really just a C tier. All right, and now we are moving on to the A tier. There are 4 traps in the A tier, and these are really, really good traps that in most situations are going to get you the kill. You can definitely use these as Piggy and win most of the time. And these traps really just have one tiny flaw that prevents them from being S tier. But for the most part, they're incredibly good. So the first trap that I'm going to place in the A tier is the black hole trap. Now, for a while, the black hole trap was actually considered to be the best trap in Piggy. So the black hole trap costs 8 energy to place down, and when you place it down, it'll actually suck in players that come near the trap. Now, it is just as small as the small trap, if not smaller than the small trap. However, because it sucks players in, it makes up for how tiny it is. It should be noted that the black hole trap is completely impossible to jump over. Do not jump over the black hole trap. It doesn't matter if you have the sprint perk. It doesn't matter what you have. Do not jump over this trap. You will die. And in some situations, this trap actually can be used against vent campers. If someone is camping a tiny little vent and they're being annoying, you might be able to place down a black hole trap and suck them in through the vent and then be able to kill them. However, the thing is, this trap is definitely definitely avoidable, although a lot of people actually don't know how to avoid this trap. It is definitely possible. You can actually avoid this trap by zooming into first person and basically just walking around the trap. You'll also have to back away from the trap as it sucks you in. It can be a little tricky to get around it, especially if Piggy is chasing you and you have to do it quickly. This is definitely a tricky thing to do, but once you get the hang of it, you can get around the black hole trap just fine. Jump trapping doesn't really affect the black hole trap at all. It doesn't really make a difference because it's impossible to jump over and you'll still be able to walk around it. But overall, this is a pretty good trap. Most people don't know how to go around it, so for the most part, it's going to get the job done. And if you weren't able to walk around it, then this would easily be one of the best traps in the game. However, there is a workaround to it, and it does cost a lot of energy. Now, this is going to be a pretty controversial one, but the second trap that I'm going to place in A tier is actually the default trap. I think the default trap is very, very slept on. It's probably one of the best traps in the game, especially for being the default one. So if you place down the default trap regularly, the player can jump over it. However, it is pretty strict timing. It is pretty precise. You have to be pretty careful when jumping over this in a doorway. Now, if the player sprints and jumps over the trap, it definitely is way easier to jump over the trap. So if the player sprints, they'll probably jump over it with relative ease. However, if you actually jump trap with the default trap, it is actually impossible to jump over this trap. I kid you not, a well-timed jump trap will make the default trap unavoidable. You will not be able to avoid this trap even if you sprint. You just won't be able to jump over it because it'll be floating in the air. So the default trap is really good because you could have an unavoidable doorway trap with a very low energy cost. The default trap only costs 4 energy. However, its minor setback is, well, you actually need the jump trap. And, you know, jump trapping can be a little tricky. You might mistime your jump trap, and if you mess it up, then, well, the player's probably just gonna jump over it. But if you can get jump trapping down pat, you will definitely be able to use the default trap and get a lot of kills guaranteed. So yeah, default trap, really slept on. It's an A tier for me. Now the third trap that I'm going to place for the A tier is the big trap. Now this costs just as much energy as the black hole trap. It costs 8 energy to place down, and this is going to place a massive trap. And for the most part, this trap is completely unavoidable in doorways. There's really no way to get around it. This trap is way too big to jump over by normal means. Now, if this trap is placed down regularly, you can jump over this trap if you have the sprint ability. So if you sprint and you time it just right, you can maybe jump over this trap, but it's really precise timing. But if you jump trap with the big trap, there is no way to get around this trap. It is completely unavoidable in that situation. Now, in my opinion, the big trap is actually better than the black hole trap because you can't walk around it like you can with the black hole. Black hole trap definitely has a pretty simple counterplay, whereas the big trap does not. I'd also say this is probably better than the default trap because you really don't have to worry about jump trapping as much, because it's pretty unlikely that a player is gonna sprint and manage to jump over the trap. That's just really difficult to do. In most cases, you won't have to worry about jump trapping. The only big problem with the big trap is how much energy it costs. Again, it just costs so much energy to use, but it'll get the job done. And the fourth and final trap for the A tier is going to be the crawling trap. Now buckle up because this is a really interesting trap. So the crawling trap costs 9 energy to place, and when you place it down, it'll actually crawl around the map and find players for you. And if it catches a player, it will grab the player and crawl it over to you. So it'll go ahead and bring you the player. Once a player is caught, it'll crawl to you for about 5 to 7 seconds. It'll actually disappear sooner if Piggy steps on the crawling trap. And another thing about the crawling trap is it can actually crawl into vents and grab vent campers. And that was actually the original intention of the crawling trap. The crawling trap can go ahead and crawl into vents and catch vent campers and basically drag them out of the vents for you for Piggy to kill. So this is a really interesting trap. First of all, this trap lasts a while. Let me tell you, the crawling trap is going to be active for around 2 to 3 minutes. And this trap basically behaves like a bot. It always goes straight for players. So you basically have a bot trap that you can place at any time, and it lasts for around 2 to 3 minutes. minutes. And in those 2 to 3 minutes, you can actually go ahead and place even more crawling traps. So you can easily have about 3 crawling traps active at a time. So that is 3 bots chasing after other players for you to kill. That is incredibly good. Having to deal with 3 of these crawling traps would be incredibly difficult. That is just a huge threat for other players. And also the crawling trap definitely has a lot of reach. There are many situations where it doesn't look like the crawling trap hit, but it actually did manage to catch a player. And also you cannot jump over the crawling trap. If you try to jump over the crawling trap, it will catch you. And not to mention, this trap can also be used to find other players, because again, the crawling trap goes straight for players. So if you don't know where a player is, you can go ahead and spawn in the crawling trap, and you can just go ahead and follow them, and eventually they'll take you to another player. So I think the key word to describe the crawling trap is versatility. You can use the crawling trap for a bunch of different things. You can use it for map control. You can use it as a second bot to overwhelm a player. You can use it to find other players. You can use it to get rid of vent campers. There's just so many things you can do with this one trap that it's kind of insane. The only big setback to the crawling trap is it still is a bot, and sometimes the bots in Piggy can be a little dumb. There are many staircases where the crawling trap will just get stuck and not know what to do. And even though the crawling trap is supposed to go for vent campers, the crawling trap actually has the same AI as a normal Piggy. A normal Piggy which knows it can't go into a vent and won't try to. So the thing is, it's supposed to get rid of vent campers, but in many cases the crawling trap will think that it won't be able to crawl into a vent, and then the bots will kind of just give up and get confused. So in many cases, the crawling trap actually won't go into the vent. And then, well, it kind of just defeats the purpose of going for vent campers because it just won't go into the vent. But overall, this is a really good trap. It's very versatile. You can do many things with it. The only thing preventing it going to S tier is just how dumb the AI can be. But that concludes the A tier, and we have finally made it to the S tier. There are 2 traps in the S tier, and these are easily the best traps in the game. I'd say both of these are evenly as good. They could honestly be interchanged as the best trap in the game. It really just depends on the map you're playing, but I would say both of these are the best trap in the game. But it can honestly be used interchangeably on which one is the best. So the first trap that is going to be in the S tier is the inflatable trap. Now the inflatable trap, this looks like something you could get around when you place it in a doorway. But if you place the inflatable trap in a doorway, it is actually impossible to avoid. There is actually no way to avoid the inflatable trap whatsoever. If you place an inflatable trap in the doorway, there's nothing a player can do except stall. They will have to stall for time until the inflatable trap disappears, in which case you can just charge your meter and place plenty more traps to kill the player with. And the best thing about it is it only costs 5 energy to place down. Most guaranteed traps cost around 8 energy, but this one only costs 5 energy to use. So that's why it's way better over something like Black Hole or Big Trap, because it only costs 5 energy, so it's way less energy to use than something like Big Trap. Now, the default trap does cost less energy, but the thing about inflatable trap is you actually don't need the jump trap at all to place this thing down. When it comes to the default trap, it's only effective if you jump trap. But with inflatable trap, you don't have to worry about jump trapping at all. Even without jump trapping, it is a guaranteed catch. So it does cost 1 extra energy, but because you don't have to worry about jump trapping, I think it's way better than the default trap, because you won't have to worry about jump trapping and you won't have to worry about messing it up. Now, there is one big downside to the inflatable trap, and it's that the inflatable part actually has collision to it. So in many cases, if Piggy is walking the wrong way, it'll actually be able to block Piggy from actually killing the player, and then the player will be able to escape in that situation. So I'd say that's the big downside to the inflatable trap. In some cases, you just won't be able to kill the player because you'll just be blocked by your own trap, which is kind of funny, to be honest. But for the most part, if you just chase the player into a room and you just place a trap in the doorway, it's a guaranteed kill. It looks like something you can walk past, but there's no way to get around this puppy. And last but not least, the final trap for S tier. In my opinion, this is the best trap in the game. We have the Snow Piggy trap. Now, the Snow Piggy trap first came out in the Christmas 2020 event, and that was before the meter update where you could only place 1 Snow Piggy Back then, it was an okay trap, but because of the meter update, it actually got buffed into one of the best traps in the game. So the Snow Piggy trap costs 9 energy to place down, and the Snow Piggy will actually throw a snowball at any players that come near it. And these snowballs will actually slow down the player so that the piggy can catch up to them. Now, what makes this trap different from all the other traps is it has huge range and unlimited use. So this trap will activate if a player only gets near it. It doesn't have to actually touch the trap. If it gets near the trap, it'll throw a snowball, and that snowball is actually completely unavoidable. The Snow Piggy literally has aimbot. It will never miss a target. So if a player gets near, it will definitely slow down that player. And again, what makes this trap unique is it actually has unlimited use. So even if it hits a player, it will remain. It won't disappear after one use. It will literally be on the map until its time limit runs out, in which case it'll eventually disappear. But you can definitely have around 2 to 3 Snow Piggy traps at the same time, and they're just unlimited use. So literally, if you just place a Snow Piggy in a common area where a lot of people have to pass by, it will guarantee hit them. You don't even have to place this trap in a doorway. In fact, I don't recommend you place it in a doorway. That's just not really optimal for this trap. If you just place it in a popular area where people have to go, then it's going to hit a lot of people. A good example of this is Book 1, Chapter 12. In the plant, you have to walk back and forth between all the hallways. If you just place Snow Piggy traps in those hallways, those players have to go through those hallways multiple times. They'll get hit multiple times, and you'll just be able to catch up to them. There's really not much you can do. Now, there is a counterplay to the Snow Piggy. There is a counterplay, and that is the sprint perk. If you sprint after getting hit by the Snow Piggy, you can actually outrun the piggy. Again, just make sure you use the ability after getting hit and not before. But the thing is, the Snow Piggy trap has unlimited use. So yeah, you can sprint against a Snow Piggy once, maybe twice, but eventually you're not going to have enough energy to combat a Snow Piggy, and then you're just dead. And if you don't have the sprint ability, you're just dead. There's very little counterplay to the Snow Piggy trap. It is one of the best traps in the game. But yeah, guys, that concludes the tier list. Here it is right here. Let me know what you guys think about this tier list. Again, I've been playing Piggy for a long time, so I kind of figured out which traps are good and which ones aren't. My personal trap setup is Inflatable Trap, Snow Piggy Trap, and Crawling Trap. That gives you just a bunch of versatility. The Crawling Trap might mess up sometimes, but it's better than just using another doorway trap. That wouldn't make much sense to use when I have the Inflatable Trap. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. And that is going to be it for this video, guys. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to use star code PURPLE when buying Robux and Roblox Premium. And I will see you guys in the next video. Stay purple.